So let's get it started. I know it was a long day, so thank you for still being here. And I know that there were a lot of talks which already spoke about parts of governance. So this talk will be about the general scope of blockchain governance, and I want to draw a picture of the future as well, and which path we might go, or which might help us to do successful blockchain governance. I will not present content which is already out there or partially only. I want to present you new insights, and I try to add value with that. Please understand that as a foundation for discussion, not for I'm the expert here. That's not the case. Nobody is pretty much the expert in that space right now. And we all need to go in a direction where nobody else went before. So to do decentralized governance, nobody knows really how this functions. This is a path we will need to go together. So you never change things by fighting existing reality. To change something, build new models that make the existing models obsolete. I was thinking about reorganization of society since I was 20. Actually, in 2010 was the year where I really started to think about that. And in the last year, after hearing about blockchain, I quitted a career as a technical account manager at Kaspersky, a very well-paid one, to come back to the passion that I want to have an impact in the world with the work I do, to combine, so to say, my heart and my brain. And I did some activities last year containing a requirements engineering workshop for a society operations system. So the question, how can we build a digital society which might have a global coordination function? And the result of that workshop in Dresden in the Impact Hub in May last year was that something like Ethereum, if it's scalable and if it's secure, can indeed be the platform and the foundation for building such a system. Other attributes which are directly related to that, which pretty much mean the same, are immutability, censorship resistance, and availability. On the other hand, after figuring that out in the summer last year, I thought about, okay, that's the technology side. But what do we need to do to coordinate a huge amount of people to work together? And there's something very, very human in there. So it's all about humans, actually. We are all humans, so we don't build systems for machine. Well, some systems are for machine, but mainly they are for restructuring the way how we do business or how we live. So there's a question after the minimal shared consensus about the principles we want to follow to enable global coordination. So for that, we started a project called A Constitution for World Citizens. Actually, it was a group of between like 15 and 20 people which were involved with that project at that stage. And the thing which we come up with was pretty much that we cannot complete such a constitution from that angle, that it is impossible to try to force values on somebody else, that it is impossible to write a document in 2D, so to say, which contains those values. We came up with the answer that we need to crowdsource the principles and that we need to develop governance functions which enable us to understand the values and to find agreement on those values. So just to point out some principles we figured out for us as a team, it's responsibility. So we believe that it is very important that when we see problems in the world that we take responsibility for that and do not wait that others do that, because then we might wait forever. There's a direct and fair aspect, so if we go in system design, we look for systems where you have direct participation and where you are able to participate in a fair manner. I mean, you don't need to take that for your platform if you disagree with these values. I just want to point out some values we find very appealing. As well as building systems which are sustainable. So if you build new markets, we need to find a way that these markets can exist for a long period of time, and that those markets are able to be sustainable, so to have closed resource loops. But enough about that values. Humans are very, very difficult to put into boxes. So every one of us thinks different, and every one of us has a different horizon. Actually, I think you all have a horizon which is more open and more global thinking, but a lot of people, they live in a village and they hear the gossip and they're interested in that, not into global problems or platforms like blockchain. Spiral dynamics is just a model which tries to modulate this different thinking models. What I want to show here is, if we design systems, we always need to think that from the user side or from the people which use those systems, there are very, very different incentives why they use those systems. For example, who is here because he thinks or she thinks that crypto is a nice space to earn money? One person? More? Two? Three? You know, it's true, it's a good incentive. I understand that. Who is here because you think you can change the world with crypto? So we have all different incentives, but we need to respect that not all of us have the same incentives to follow that trend of blockchain. And that we need to take that in consideration when we think about governance. When I speak about governance in these circumstances, I think we all know what it means to be self-aware. I can reflect with myself. But we as a society come to a limit. The technological acceleration we perceive right now with AI and robotics and the blockchain space, it's just getting too much for a single person. So we have too much change to follow up all those trends. The world is changing faster than we can rebuild our thinking models about the world. So to just follow that logically, it means that we need to start to work more collectively to understand the world, how it is, how the world functions. And this means that hierarchical decision functions start to fail because they are not able to grasp the complexity of the world anymore. And when you think about blockchain, I believe that this is an opportunity for us to create a collective mirror to self-perceive us collectively in those systems we create. So governance mechanisms to optimize cohesion and synchronicity, I wrote there. What I'm saying here is we should think about what do we want to optimize, what is the goal of the systems we are building. I think we should build systems which help us to understand the world and make wise decisions about the future. And this is true for every D app which is fully decentralized. Take this for example. I'm glad we all agree. Oh, aha. I'm glad we all agree. It is the same thing which happens every day. We speak with somebody about something, and this person understands it differently. So synchronicity, or having the conversation or having exchange of information, is crucial to find the same understanding and move in the same direction. So governance, just to define the words here, without having the view on crypto, governance is to exercise continuously sovereign authority over something, and the distributed aspect is to divide several or many, to divide it between several or many. If you combine that, that comes down to like network governance. I mean, we don't speak about BitTorrent here, we speak about D apps and platforms. So it's about distributed governance. If we take governance in a very simple way in blockchain systems, we speak about protocol governance or layer 1 governance. So this means that when we think about cryptocurrency, it's really about which rules do we implement into the protocol and what are the incentives in the network, so the economics, to run the network. We need to divide that further. When we speak about decentralization, it's not about the servers which are just split over the world. This is one aspect. That's the architectural decentralization. But we have also a logical decentralization. This, in this case, means if we have a protocol which is attackable through one attack and all nodes are impacted by that attack, we have a logic centralization. Some people might disagree. They say, okay, logic decentralization means if you cut the system in half, both systems can run. I would agree with Bitcoin, that's the case, but if we have a general protocol problem, which is parsed in the same way from the nodes, we still have a big issue here. So, and then there is the political decentralization or centralization. So if we want to really run resilient systems, we need to find a way to politically decentralize those systems. And this is one of the major things we need to speak about, because if you're controlling, as a product team, the D app, and you can shut down the smart contract. It's not politically decentralized. This is a sketch with the try to make a schema out of the development of decentralization when we start an ICO and then we bring into the world a product. So in the beginning we have the idea. This means one person, it's very centralized. Then we form a team, it's still very centralized. We do an ICO. We involve more people, it becomes more decentralized in that sense, because one person might be able to go out of the project and it might continue. Then we have test launch, mainnet launch, and with those launches and with those steps, we need to ensure that we enhance the decentralization of that system on each layer, on the political, on the logical layer, and on the architectural level. If we grow the system further, we will face, if we go into markets, a strong competition from the old industries. So they will fight against that. And if at that point the system is not decentralized enough, you will have strong lobbyism and pressure on those people which can crack down on those systems. So it's very important that we, in the end, come up with a system which is fully decentralized, which means that the architect teams demote themselves from their role as a central authority in that system and become just a participant. And I think this is a very, very hard way to go. This is not easy because it has a lot to do with actually I feel responsible for the baby I created and now I need to step down. I think I like the picture from growing children, and then you have the point that you need to accept that they are old enough to walk on their own. And that's pretty true for crypto economic systems from my point of view. So Satoshi Nakamoto created a system in 2008 which was mature enough to eliminate the political centralization problem in the beginning. And later on, and we all know this became a bigger problem again because the miners were starting to collude and influence the system much more. So this is the question if we will see more negative impacts regarding Bitcoin or we see it proceed, we will see. But this is a danger which is true for all systems. When it comes down to Bitcoin, I mean, the miners have the control, they have the ability to implement new code. They are pretty much the decision makers here, what is running, how the network is running. If you look at the incentive structure here, we need to understand that everyone has a different incentive there. So for example, the miners, they have an incentive to maximize the block rewards, and they have incentives to maximize the fees paid per transaction. But this is a different incentive when it comes down to the developers and the users. The users want to have a more richer experience with the features. They want to use that, and they want to maximize their holdings. And the developers, well, actually, they are pretty aligned with the users, but they want to also be able to participate, to develop this system further. And some of them want to play a crucial role, so the core developer teams, and want to influence the system. When it comes to incentives which are not aligned, but contradictory, for example, the miners against the users, then we need to look and watch out that the governance system will create an equilibrium. This means that you balance out the different interests in the system. If you don't do that, the system will, like a biological system, go to one side and die. And just to understand also the incentive structure, if you are able to find incentives which are all aligned between all interest groups, these are the things which create huge network effects. When it comes down to Bitcoin, it is the price, increasing price. So all the holders profit from increasing price of Bitcoin. And that's the strong thing which creates a network effect in Bitcoin. If we look at the governance structure, it's an offline governance structure. This means the miner speak with each other, and they have their discussions in their offices over Zoom or whatever, and they come to directions they want to go. And then they say a specific date, and then we have a Bitcoin Gold. Or another fork. Or we don't have a fork, but an improvement of the protocol. So what I'm saying here is we have an offline governance structure, which results in the picture we have today. On-chain governance and off-chain governance are pretty easy to differentiate. Just think about off-chain governance, everything you do normally in communication. to find a group's consensus. So it can be a discussion in the real world, it can be a mailing list, it can be a Reddit community, or a Twitter influencer. On the on-chain governance, we speak about those governance functions which are implemented in smart contracts and are executed to govern the protocol or the system. For example, Vlad Samfir, he is very interesting to follow and to read about when you want to know more about blockchain governance from the technical perspective. He really goes into bits and bytes. And he is a big influencer though. So, for example, he makes, for example, that voting online, if you think that EOS should be cut out of Ethereum, he makes that for fun. He says he's a troll. I believe him. But the point is, this influences. This is offline governance. Okay. We have different incentives when it comes down to, do we want to change governance structures with Bitcoin or Ethereum? If we change them, for example, to on-chain governance, this would mean that users and miners are actually not participating anymore in the discussion of what is going to happen with the protocol. So this is the reason why people like Vlad say, okay, that's not a good idea, and I fully agree here. We need to really think about what do we want to have online, what off-chain, and what do we want to have on-chain. Who knows what a DAO is? It was spoken a lot about today, so I will not go too much into the depths here. It's just pretty much a structure which is on-chain governance to enable pretty much what a shareholder representation is. So multiple people come together, put money in a bowl together, and then they decide in a voting principle how this money is going to be spent. Unfortunately, the DAO had created one of the first big splits in Ethereum. You all know that, but the DAO model itself is not that. It's one of the very important governance models we see on-chain, and we see the reward DAIO and the DAICO and a lot of different other models around that. And I think they will fly. But this will take time. When it comes down to how the decision was made in Ethereum, there was a voting, a coin-based voting. This means that your vote is weighted by the amount of Ether you stake. And I just want to bring that in because that's the governance algorithms you see right now, or functions which are used. And the problem with this is, if you look at it, that one voter had nearly 25% of the influence. So what is this? Is this really the governance function we are looking for? If we go further, I was happy to participate at the Ethereum conference in Paris from the 8th to the 10th of March. And at that conference, it was at this building, at that courtyard, there was an off-chain governance meeting. And that off-chain governance meeting, which is people which participated are seen here, actually discussed the parity wallet hack and what is with the freezing funds there and what to do with the freezing funds. It was a very emotional, very engaging discussion, and I think it was very valuable because it was a lot of bandwidth between the participants. And in the end, we saw a lot of disappointment, we saw a lot of anger, we saw also people which said we need to be truthful with the principles we have, like immutability. And the end consequence is what happened on the 24th of this month, which is the result of their voting. So we had a voting finished again through the coin holders, so Cohen Voting with the parity funds. And the result looks like that. We had like 300 people voting against, for yes, so that the parity funds will be opened up through a fork. 330 which voted no. And when you look at the percentages, you see that there is a huge difference because of the influence, how much money you stake there or how much ether you stake there. The problem is with staking coins is that you can influence people by paying them. So you just pay them to ensure that they vote for you. And this is happening actually. So people get rewards for voting in your favor, and this influences the results. So we have seen that in the past with multiple examples that this can be manipulated. And this results pretty much in a risk that we face in plutocracy. So as long as we have good leaders there, everything is fine. But what I'm saying here is that there is the risk that the good kings might be pressured to make different decisions. And then we face as a community the situation that we cannot go through with the decisions anymore because we have very strong votes on the other side. I hope that this will not happen. The other side is we have an underrepresentation of all those interests which are not represented through the coin holders. This is the current state, and just to give you an overview, and I might miss like a lot of things which are happening there. I'm pretty sure that I did not cover even a fraction of it. But I want to speak with you about higher order distributed governance. So we spoke about like the simple steps we have right now, the simple principles we have right now, but the question is, what can we do? And when it comes down to blockchain governance, I think the simple governance we see with layer 1 governance and the real world governance we see in our world, like when we think about politicians or about DApps which have, depending on the DApp, much more sophisticated governance models, the question is, are they different or are they the same? I think that they belong to each other. I think that they are depending on each other, and I will explain why. I want to give you another definition, and this definition is, please don't take it too serious. Just take it for a thinking thought or to think about it. Introduction, D-governance is introducing shared decision making without central authorities or hierarchies to legitimate a decision. The outcome needs to be balanced to optimize for the least negative and the most positive impact on all involved parties. In other words, legitimate decisions while optimizing for omni-win while keeping equilibrium with asynchronous incentives or interests. This includes a principle which says, let's try to not maximize for one party the outcome, but let's try to minimize the negative impacts for all parties involved. This is very important if you have limited shared resources. Limited shared resources like this planet, for example, but also if we want to avoid conflicts, open conflicts, or tensions. This is very important to aim for omni-win instead of competition. If we look at Wikipedia and look on collective intelligence, we see this structure. And it struck me because if you look very deeply there, you have on the left side the cognition, and then you have predictions of future events in politics and technology. What part of blockchain is fitting there? Any ideas? Prediction markets. Gnosis, for example. So prediction markets play a role when it comes down to collective intelligence or to how we can make decisions together. If we look at cooperation, we see networks of trust, open source, and peer-to-peer business. What is this? It's a blockchain. Contains all the elements. And if we look at coordination, we see ad hoc communities and coordinating collective actions. These are the governance functions. So let's move forward to connect a little bit more dots. Ignorance is the mother of all evils. I think that we all are ignorant. And this is, don't take it as an offense. We just have all a very limited view of this world. And if we accept that, this gives us the opportunity to ask questions and to understand more. So I think that we are all not capable of really understanding the whole world. So if we accept that, we can start to ask questions how we can actively work together to understand more of the world or build collectives which are able to make good decisions. To think about higher forms of governance, I want to introduce two things you for sure heard about before. So we need self-sovereign digital identities for that. Just as a definition here, self-sovereign digital identities will replace any password key you use today while enabling full control over your data, and you can access it or other in a different way said. This is the potential digital self-sovereign digital identities have. They also enable that you get rid of sibling attacks while doing voting. So this is very crucial. If we want to do voting in any D app, we need to have a system to ensure that a human is voting, that we have a proof of a human, and that we ensure that we don't have 1,000 votes or 10,000 votes from one person. Digital voting is another requirement we have, and the funny thing here is we all have that. Every D app which includes voting will need that. So voting anytime, anywhere, close to zero cost procedures. So I'm running out of time, so I try to get it all in. If you look at that model, I was speaking about layer 1 governance and layer 2 governance. If I speak about layer 1 governance, I mean those things which are on the one side protocol governance, but I also mean the things we all need anyway with each D app. For example, an anonymous verifiable voting infrastructure. We don't need to build that 10,000 times, we just can do that one time, and we can ensure that this is part of the core protocols. As well as software and digital identities, because we will use that anyway again and again and again, and we can ensure that we have a very well-functioned, very resilient system at this point, which can be used by any AD app. In the upper model, you see higher functions or higher D governance functions. So this means if we combine governance functions, we get them in here and can create governance models. I want to classify them a little bit, and this is only a proposal. If we speak, I want to introduce like 3 forms: sensor functions, which are for reflection, proposal functions, which are for proposing solutions, and signaling or decision functions. If we look at the sensor functions, we have the situation that we need to have a way to reflect with our environment. So for example, you're driving in a car, and you are with multiple people in that car, and one person said, oh, okay, I need a brake. Okay, so why is saying that? That's some kind of a sensor function. Or seeing, for example, in the car, oh, I'm running low on fuel. That's some kind of a sensor function. A survey can be a sensor function to understand the state of the system. If we go into a proposal function, we speak about those things which are needed to come up with a solution. So for example, some people say, okay, take the next fuel station, or actually in 500 meters there's a parking lot. What do you think? Let's take that one. So these are the proposals, and if you use very sophisticated methods like the Delphi method, you can very good crowdsource expertise here. Petition systems are another system for having a proposal function to ensure that you can come up with a solution for a given problem. Part of that is also the signaling or the signal function or decision functions, and we have a lot of them, and we know a lot of them. For example, if we want to vote on a proposal, in old Rome with the gladiators, we had the situation that the leader was standing there looking at the crowd, was waiting for the signal functions, how they want to have the decision if the gladiator lives or dies. After getting that, he had also the proposal already to decide what he wanted. But you can do that way more sophisticated, so we have voting function, contract voting, median voting, modified approval voting, or other more complex systems like liquid democracy. I want to get a slide in from a professor. I will show the source on the next slide. If it really depends which decision we want to make, which decision function we need. So it's very, very context based for that. So we know already, and we have mathematical proof, that specific things are very easy to decide with specific functions, and others very hard. Make a yes or no statement to, do you want to have a green, blue, or yellow car? You can't. But if I ask you, do you want to have a yellow or a green car, it's easy. So this is really very important to understand. Based on the complexity of the decision we want to make, we need to take the right decision function. I think you might know that example. There was testing how much a cow weighs from a group of experts, and they were pretty good with guessing that. So the crowd intelligence worked here. I would bet that this works also for the Mount Everest if we ask all of you. This only works if we are related to the thing we are making a decision on. And this only works if we really want to find, for example, the average value. If we want to find something else, we need to take a different decision function. This guy, Pietro Speroni.it, he's a leading expert in that field. He has done a lot of mathematical proofs there. And I can only highly, just visit his website. It's very impressive. Just as a short question, because I started later, do I have another 5 minutes? Okay, so I'm nearly through. Just to, okay, so this is a model which tries to generalize the way how we can build governance systems based on what we already introduced. So we have the government layer 1, which is the core layers where decisions are made about all the core protocols we all need. And then we have DApp and content governance, which is based on the core levels, layers, which will live in the shards or in the namespaces. So just think about it, that we have all that smaller blockchains, which speak with the main blockchains, but where we can have separate functions, for example, which consensus we want to reach, but we also can introduce other governance functions there. So if you think, for example, about Aragon, Aragon is a model which provides policies, and every DApp is a child of that smart contract policies. And this is what you see here represented. So I believe that we will have many shards and many namespaces which have their values and which provide their policies. And for example, namespace B could be a government namespace where you have government compliance, while namespace C is an open namespace where you don't have government compliance. The point is, when you spawn instances on those different shards of a DApp, the interesting thing becomes that you can interconnect them, but you can decide which instance you want to connect to all the other instances, or which one you want to let out. For example, if we have a namespace B, the situation that illegal content is provided by a social media DApp, the DApp provider might have a governance function to block that, but the DApp itself will run in that namespace further, but will not influence the other namespaces. So we can have a multi-layer approach here to enable regulation for governance on the one side, but we have free shards on the other side. Feel free to come to me to discuss this further. This is just one of the first drafts, and we are very happy to develop this further. Just as a call for action, governance functions in general are highly complex, and we have probably thousands of them. So it's about time that we start to search them, classify them, and generalize them, so we don't need to come up with them over and over and over again. And we need to understand what governance function fits the best in which situation. And based on that, we can accelerate something we need for every DApp, decentralized governance. As a short announcement, there is a conference planned in Athens for giving that a room to discuss those things further. At the moment, we have some pending conversations to get it kickstarted. If you have ideas about giving this topic the room it deserves, please reach out and feel free to support it. Okay, it's time for questions. Thank you.